The morning Roswell Strand found her. Frost had turned the world into something sharp and glittering, the kind of cold that cut through a man's coat and settled in his bones like it planned to stay forever. He had been riding back to his small ranch outside Loveland, Colorado, after spending 3 days helping the Hendersons mend their winter fences, when he spotted what looked like a bundle of dark fabric crumpled beside the road. November of 1882 had brought an early winter to the Colorado Territory, and the previous night's freeze had been brutal enough to kill livestock if they weren't properly sheltered. Roswell pulled his horse to a stop, his breath misting in the air, and squinted at the shape that didn't quite belong in the landscape of white and brown. It moved. He was off his horse before his mind fully processed what he was seeing. A woman lay there, her dress torn and mudded, her dark hair tangled with bits of dried grass and ice. But what seized his attention, what made something in his chest clench tight, were her feet. Bare. Completely bare against the frozen ground, the skin mottled red and white, small cuts bleeding sluggishly where the frost had been cruelest. "Madam," Roswell dropped to his knees beside her, his gloved hands hovering uncertainly. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with cold. They were the color of summer honey, he would remember later, though in that moment all he could think was that she was going to lose her toes if he didn't act fast. "Can you hear me?" He pulled off his coat without waiting for an answer, draping it over her trembling form. She tried to speak, but her lips were too blue, her jaw shaking too hard to form words. Roswell made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. He scooped her up, registering how light she was, how she felt like little more than bones and will, and lifted her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. She made a small sound when his arms came around her to take the reins, something between a whimper and a protest, but she was too weak to fight. Roswell kicked his horse into a canter, holding the woman against his chest, trying to share what warmth he had. His ranch was only 2 miles away. 2 miles that suddenly felt like 20. "Stay with me," he said, his voice rough with urgency he didn't quite understand. "Just stay with me." Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he felt the violent shivers that racked her body. Roswell had seen men die from exposure before. He had seen what the cold could do when it got its claws into someone. The thought of this woman, this stranger, succumbing to the frost, made something fierce and protective rise up in him. When his ranch house finally came into view, small and weathered but solid, Roswell had never been so grateful for the life he had built. He pulled his horse right up to the porch, dismounted with the woman still in his arms, and kicked the door open. The fire in his hearth had burned down to embers, but it was still warmer inside than out. He carried her to his bed, the only real bed in the single-room cabin, and laid her down as gently as he could, her feet. He had to take care of her feet first. Roswell grabbed a basin and filled it with water from the pump outside, then set it by the fire to take the chill off. Not hot water. He knew better than that. Warming someone too fast could do as much damage as the cold itself. While the water warmed, he pulled the quilt from his bed and wrapped it around her shoulders, then added wood to the fire until flames began to dance and crackle. The woman's eyes were closed now, her breathing shallow but steady. Roswell knelt beside the bed and carefully lifted one of her feet. The skin was like ice, and he could see the damage the frost had done. Blisters were already forming on her toes, and the cuts from walking barefoot looked angry and red. "What happened to you?" he murmured, though he didn't expect an answer. He brought the basin over, now filled with lukewarm water, and gently lowered her feet into it. She gasped, her eyes flying open, and tried to pull away. "I know," Roswell said, his voice soft. "I know it hurts, but we have to warm them up slowly or you could lose them entirely." She stared at him with those honey-colored eyes, confusion and fear warring in their depths. Then she looked down at her feet in the basin, at his hands supporting her ankles, and something seemed to break in her. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and steady. "You're safe now," Roswell told her, though he had no idea if that was true. He didn't know who she was running from or what had brought her to this state. But sitting there in his small cabin with this woman's frozen feet in his hands, he made her a promise that came from somewhere deep and certain in his soul. "You'll never walk cold again." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither of them fully understood yet. The woman's tears continued to fall, but she nodded, just once, before exhaustion pulled her back under. Roswell spent the rest of that day and into the night tending to her. He changed the water in the basin 3 times, gradually increasing the temperature. He cleaned and bandaged the cuts on her feet with supplies from his medical kit, the same one he used on his horses. He made broth from salted beef and convinced her to swallow a few spoonfuls when she woke briefly. He banked the fire to keep the cabin warm but not stifling. And through it all, he wondered. She had no shoes, no coat. Her dress, once he examined it more closely, was of decent quality but had been torn in several places. There were bruises on her arms, yellowing at the edges. Old bruises. Whatever had happened to her hadn't been a single incident. When dawn broke on the second day, painting the frost-covered world in shades of pink and gold, Roswell was dozing in the chair he had pulled up beside the bed. He jerked awake at the sound of her voice, hoarse and uncertain. "Where am I?" he straightened, working the kink out of his neck. "My ranch, about 4 miles outside Loveland. I found you on the road yesterday morning." She tried to sit up, winced, and fell back against the pillows. Her gaze darted around the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings, the rifle mounted above the door, the cook stove in the corner. Looking for threats, Roswell realized, looking for escape routes. "You're safe here," he said again. "I promise you that. No one's going to hurt you." Her laugh was bitter and broken. "You don't know that. I know I won't hurt you, and anyone who tries will have to go through me." She studied him for a long moment. This tall cowboy with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes the color of a winter sky. He had a scar across his jaw, she noticed, and calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work. He looked like he was in his mid-20s, though the lines around his eyes suggested he had lived more than his years. "Why?" she finally asked. Roswell shook his head. "Don't rightly know, seemed like the thing to do. Most men wouldn't." "Then most men are damned fools." That surprised a small, genuine smile from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger. Roswell found himself wanting to see that smile again. "I'm Roswell," he offered. "Roswell Strand. This is my place, small as it is." She hesitated, as if even her name was dangerous to speak aloud. Then, "Beatrice Cooper." "Well, Miss Cooper, how about I make us some breakfast and then we can figure out what to do next?" Beatrice nodded, though uncertainty clouded her features. She watched as Roswell moved to the stove, as he prepared coffee and cornbread and fried eggs with the competence of a man long used to caring for himself. The domesticity of it was surreal after everything she had been through. She had run. That was the simple truth of it. She had run from Denver, from the man her father had promised her to, from a future that looked like a prison sentence. Marcus Whitfield was 45 years old, wealthy, respected, and cruel. She had seen it in the way he looked at her, in the bruising grip of his hands on her arms when he thought no one was watching. Her father, desperate to settle gambling debts, had sold her like chattel, so she had run. She had taken nothing but the dress on her back, had waited until the household was asleep, and had slipped out into the night. She had walked and walked, trading a ride on a farmer's wagon for helping his wife with their children, hitching another ride with a merchant heading south. But 2 days ago, the merchant had looked at her with intentions that made her skin crawl, and she had jumped from his wagon in the middle of nowhere and run into the darkness. She had lost her shoes in a creek crossing, the current stronger than she had anticipated. By the time she realized how cold it was, how unprepared she was already miles from anywhere. She had kept walking because stopping meant dying. She had walked until her feet were too numb to feel, until exhaustion pulled her down into the frost, and then Roswell Strand had found her. "Here." He set a plate in front of her, then hesitated. "Can you sit up? Do you need help?" Beatrice's pride wanted to say no, but her body had other ideas. Roswell helped her into a sitting position, propping pillows behind her back, his touch careful and respectful. When his hand accidentally brushed her arm, she flinched and he pulled back immediately. "Sorry," he said. "No, I'm sorry. I'm just not used to kindness from men." Something dark passed over Roswell's features. "That's so." Beatrice focused on the food, taking a small bite of cornbread. It was good, better than she expected. "You're a good cook. Bachelor living. You learn or you starve." He settled into the chair with his own plate. "How are your feet feeling?" She flexed her toes experimentally under the quilts and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her feet like lightning. "They hurt." "That's actually a good sign. Means the feeling's coming back. You were lucky, Miss Cooper. Another hour in that frost and you might have lost them." Beatrice set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. The reality of how close she had come to death was overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most would have ridden right past." Roswell met her eyes across the small table. "Then I'm glad I'm not most people." They ate in companionable silence after that, and Beatrice found herself relaxing incrementally. This cabin, small and rough as it was, felt safer than anywhere she had been in months, maybe years. Roswell Strand, with his quiet competence and gentle hands, was nothing like the men she had known in Denver. After breakfast, Roswell checked her feet again, changing the bandages with a care that made something in Beatrice's chest ache. No one had ever tended to her like this. Her mother had died when she was 12, and her father had remarried a woman who saw Beatrice as competition rather than a daughter. When her father had announced her engagement to Marcus Whitfield, her stepmother had been delighted. "You're healing well," Roswell said, interrupting her thoughts. "But you shouldn't try to walk for at least a few days, maybe a week." "I can't stay here that long. I'm already imposing on your hospitality." "You're not imposing, and even if you were, where would you go?" His eyes searched her face. "You're running from something, someone." "I won't pry if you don't want to tell me, but I won't send you back out into the cold either." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes again. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you'd rather risk freezing to death than go back to wherever you came from." "That tells me everything I need to know about the situation you're in." He sat back, his expression serious. "Stay, at least until you're healed, at least until we can figure out a proper plan. And if whoever I'm running from comes looking, then they'll find a man who doesn't take kindly to people who hurt women." The certainty in his voice made Beatrice believe him. She nodded slowly, exhaustion washing over her again. "Just a few days, until my feet heal, however long you need." Roswell helped her lie back down, and she was asleep before he even pulled the quilts up to her chin. He stood there for a moment, looking down at this woman who had tumbled into his life like a storm, and felt the first stirrings of something he couldn't quite name. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Roswell did his ranch work in the mornings, tending to his small herd of cattle and the horses he raised for sale. Beatrice rested, her feet slowly healing, and watched him through the cabin window. He moved with an economy of motion she found fascinating, every action purposeful and efficient. In the afternoons he would return and they would talk. At first, the conversations were surface level. The weather, the ranch, the town of Loveland and its quirky residents. But gradually, layers peeled back. Beatrice told him about growing up in Denver, about her mother's death and her father's remarriage. She told him about Marcus Whitfield, about the bruises and the fear and the desperate decision to run. Roswell listened without judgment, his anger carefully controlled but visible in the set of his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You did the right thing," he finally said. "Running takes courage to choose the unknown over a known evil. My father will be furious. The scandal alone will ruin what's left of his reputation. That's his burden to bear, not yours. A father's supposed to protect his daughter, not sell her to settle debts." The conviction in his words made Beatrice's throat tight. "You say that like it's simple." "It is simple. It's people who make it complicated." Roswell, in turn, told her about his own past. He had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers. His father had been a hard man, quick with his fists and slow with affection. When Roswell was 19, he had left, unable to bear the violence and volatility any longer. He had drifted north, working as a ranch hand, saving every penny until he had enough to buy this small piece of land in Colorado. "I wanted something that was mine," he explained. "Something no one could take away or destroy. This ranch, small as it is, it's mine. I built the cabin with my own hands. I raised the fences. I bought the cattle 1 or 2 at a time as I could afford them. It's not much, but it's honest work and it's mine." Beatrice understood that desire more than he knew. "It's a good life," she said, "better than most have." "It's lonely sometimes," Roswell admitted, "but lonely's better than cruel." Their eyes met and something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding of shared pain and shared determination to build something better. By the end of the first week, Beatrice could stand for short periods, though her feet were still tender and bandaged. Roswell had given her a pair of his wool socks to wear, comically large on her small feet but warm. She had taken over some of the cooking, insisting that she needed to earn her keep, and Roswell had been surprised to find that she was quite good at it. "My mother taught me," Beatrice explained as she rolled out dough for biscuits. "She said a woman needed to know how to take care of herself, not just rely on others. Smart woman. She was. I wish she had lived long enough to see me grown. I think she would have fought harder against the marriage than I could." Roswell was mending a bridle at the table, his hands sure and steady with the leather and needle. "You're grown now. You fought. That's what matters." Beatrice shaped the biscuits and placed them in the Dutch oven. "What happens when I'm healed? I can't stay here forever and I have nowhere else to go." It was a question that had been lurking in the background, unspoken but present. Roswell set down the bridle and looked at her seriously. "You could stay, if you wanted." Her hands stilled. "Stay as my wife." The words dropped into the cabin like stones into still water, ripples of implication spreading outward. Beatrice turned to face him fully, flour dusting her hands and apron. "You can't be serious." "I'm serious as a heart attack." Roswell stood, crossing to where she stood by the stove. "I know we haven't known each other long. I know this isn't how things are usually done. But I also know that you need protection, a name that's not your father's, a place where Marcus Whitfield can't touch you. And I know that I haven't felt this alive, this awake, since you stumbled into my life." Beatrice's heart was hammering in her chest. "Roswell, that's not a reason to marry someone. I won't be your charity case." "You're not charity. You're the first person in years who's made me think about a future beyond just surviving day to day." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and hope mixing in his expression. "I'm not saying I'm in love with you, not yet, but I could be. I think maybe I'm already starting to be. And more importantly, I respect you. I admire your courage. I want to protect you, yes, but I also want to know you. To give this, whatever this is between us, a chance to grow into something real." Tears were streaming down Beatrice's face now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, of a future she had thought was impossible suddenly spreading out before her. "I don't love you either," she said, her voice shaking. "Not yet. But when you pulled me onto your horse, when you warmed my feet and promised I'd never walk cold again, something in me recognized something in you. Something good and true." Roswell took her flour-dusted hands in his calloused ones. "So, is that a yes?" "It's a yes. But we do this properly. We court. We learn each other. We build something real, not just a marriage of convenience." A smile broke across Roswell's face, transforming him from merely handsome to something that made Beatrice's breath catch. "We'll do it however you want. We'll take all the time you need." "I'll need new shoes first," Beatrice said. And then she was laughing, and Roswell was laughing with her, and the future didn't seem quite so terrifying anymore. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Loveland. The pastor, a kindly man named Reverend Thomas, asked no questions about the speed of the courtship or the bride's lack of family in attendance. In a frontier town, people made their own rules, created their own families from the rubble of their pasts. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress that Roswell had bought for her in town, along with a pair of sturdy boots that fit her healing feet perfectly. He had also bought her a coat, warm and well-made, and a hat to keep the Colorado sun off her face. The look in his eyes when he presented these gifts to her was worth more than gold. "You'll never walk cold again," he had repeated, echoing that first promise. "I mean to keep my word." The ceremony was brief and simple. Roswell's neighbor, Thomas Henderson, served as witness, along with his wife Mary. Beatrice had no family, no friends, but standing there beside Roswell in the small church, she didn't feel alone. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "I do," she said when the moment came, her voice clear and certain. "I do," Roswell echoed, and when he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. The Hendersons had insisted on hosting a small celebration at their ranch, and though both Roswell and Beatrice would have preferred to return to the quiet of their own cabin, they agreed out of politeness. The meal was simple but hearty, and Mary Henderson kept pressing second helpings on everyone while exclaiming over how lovely Beatrice looked. "Roswell's a good man," Mary said as she pulled Beatrice aside to help with the dishes. "One of the best I've known. You're lucky to have found each other." "I know," Beatrice said softly, "though I'm not sure luck had much to do with it. It felt more like fate." Mary smiled knowingly. "Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Roswell and Beatrice finally made their way back to the ranch. Their ranch now. Their home. The thought made Beatrice's chest tight with emotion she couldn't quite name. Inside the cabin, Roswell had clearly made an effort. The bed had fresh linens. Candles were lit on the table. A fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth. It was nothing fancy, but it was theirs. "I know this isn't what you grew up with," Roswell said, suddenly uncertain. "I know it's small and rough and probably not what you dreamed of." Beatrice turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "It's perfect, it's real, it's ours. That's more than I ever hoped for." That night they came together with a tenderness that surprised them both. Roswell was gentle, patient, constantly checking to make sure she was comfortable. Beatrice, for her part, discovered that intimacy didn't have to be something to fear, something to endure. With Roswell, it was a conversation, a dance, a way of learning each other that went beyond words. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Roswell's arm wrapped around Beatrice's waist, her head resting on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and felt safer than she ever had in her life. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For finding me, for saving me, for giving me a future." Roswell pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for letting me." Winter deepened its hold on Colorado over the following weeks. Snow fell in earnest, blanketing the ranch in white, turning the landscape into something from a dream. Roswell taught Beatrice how to care for the cattle in winter, how to break ice on the water troughs, how to recognize when an animal was in distress. She proved to be a quick study, unafraid of the work or the cold. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Roswell working on tack or carving small figures from wood while Beatrice read aloud from the books he owned. There weren't many: a Bible, a collection of Shakespeare's plays, a battered copy of Robinson Crusoe, but she made them come alive with her expressive reading. Roswell would watch her in the firelight, marveling at how his life had changed in such a short time. "What are you looking at?" Beatrice asked one evening, catching him staring. "You, us, this life we're building." She set down the book and came to sit on the floor beside his chair, leaning her head against his knee. "Are you happy?" Roswell ran his fingers through her hair, marveling at the softness of it. "More than I ever thought I could be. You, deliriously happy. It scares me sometimes how happy I am. Like it's too good to be real, like it might be taken away." "I won't let anyone take you away," Roswell said fiercely. "I promise you that. I know. But I also know the world doesn't always care what we promise." It was true, and Roswell knew it. Life on the frontier was uncertain, subject to weather and illness and 100 other dangers. But he pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the present, on the warmth of the fire and the woman he was growing to love more with each passing day. Christmas came, and with it a surprise. Roswell had gone into town for supplies and returned not only with flour and coffee and all the necessities, but also with a length of green fabric and a small wrapped package. "For you," he said, presenting them to Beatrice with the awkwardness of a man unused to gift-giving. She unwrapped the package carefully, gasping when she saw what lay inside. It was a pair of hair combs, delicate and lovely with small stones that caught the light. "Roswell, these are beautiful. You shouldn't have spent the money." "I wanted to. You deserve beautiful things." He gestured to the fabric. "Mary Henderson said she'd help you make a new dress if you wanted. Something that's yours, that you chose." Beatrice threw her arms around his neck, overcome with emotion. "Thank you for everything, for all of this." Roswell held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, the vanilla and lavender from the soap she made. "You don't have to thank me for loving you." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "You love me, I do. I love you, Beatrice. I think I have since the moment I saw you in that frost and knew I'd move heaven and earth to keep you safe." "I love you too," she whispered. "I was afraid to say it, afraid to feel it, but I do. I love you, Roswell Strand, with everything I am." Their kiss was deep and searching, a sealing of vows that went beyond what they had spoken in the church. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and grinning. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Strand," Roswell said. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Strand." The new year of 1883 arrived with brutal cold and heavy snows that kept them close to the cabin for days at a time. But neither minded. They used the time to simply be together, to talk and laugh and make love and dream about the future. Beatrice told Roswell about her hopes of one day having a larger house, maybe with a proper kitchen and a room for sewing. Roswell talked about expanding the herd, about building a barn that could shelter more horses, about making the ranch profitable enough to hire help. "We'll build it together," Beatrice said. "Whatever we do, we'll do it together." "Together," Roswell agreed and sealed the promise with a kiss. February brought the first hint of spring, a false promise that the worst of winter was over. Roswell was in the barn repairing a stall when he heard a horse approaching. Visitors were rare at the ranch, especially in winter, and his instincts immediately went on alert. He grabbed his rifle and stepped out to see who was coming. Two men on horseback were making their way up the road. Even from a distance, Roswell could tell they were trouble. They sat their horses with the arrogance of men used to getting their way, and their clothes marked them as city folk, probably from Denver. Beatrice had seen them too. She appeared in the cabin doorway, her face pale. "Roswell," she said, and the fear in her voice made his blood run cold. "Go inside," he ordered. "Bar the door. Don't come out unless I tell you to." "Roswell, please don't do anything foolish." "I won't. But I won't let them take you either. Now go." Beatrice disappeared inside, and Roswell heard the bar slide into place. He positioned himself in front of the cabin, rifle held loosely but ready, and waited. The men pulled their horses to a stop about 10 feet away. The first man was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and cold eyes. The second was younger but had the same cruel set to his mouth that Roswell recognized from Beatrice's descriptions. Marcus Whitfield and someone else, probably her father. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Roswell asked, his voice neutral. The older man spoke. "I'm looking for my daughter. Beatrice Cooper. We have reason to believe she's here. This is the Strand Ranch. Only Strands live here." Marcus Whitfield leaned forward in his saddle, his eyes narrowing. "Don't play games, Cowboy. We tracked her here. We know you've been hiding her." "I'm not hiding anyone. My wife is inside, but her name is Beatrice Strand, not Cooper. If you're looking for someone else, I suggest you look elsewhere." Beatrice's father's face flushed with anger. "She's my daughter, and she's promised to Mr. Whitfield here. Whatever nonsense marriage you've concocted doesn't change that." "The law might disagree with you," Roswell said calmly. "We were married legal and proper, witnessed and recorded. She's my wife, and she's staying my wife." "I'll have that marriage annulled," her father blustered. "I'll take this to court. I'll see you ruined. You can try. But you'll have to explain to a judge why you sold your daughter to settle gambling debts, why she ran from you in terror, why she was willing to risk death rather than marry this man." Roswell's gaze shifted to Marcus Whitfield. Why she had bruises on her arms before she ever met him. Whitfield's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, but Roswell was faster. The rifle came up, aimed directly at Whitfield's chest. "I wouldn't if I were you. I'm a fair shot, and at this distance, I don't miss." "This isn't over," Whitfield said, his voice low and dangerous. "Yeah, it is. Beatrice isn't property. She's a human being with the right to choose her own life. She chose me. She chose this. And unless you want to explain to the law why you're trespassing and threatening armed violence, I suggest you turn those horses around and ride back to Denver." For a long moment, no one moved. The tension was thick enough to cut. Then Beatrice's father made a disgusted sound and yanked his horse's head around. "You'll regret this," he spat at Roswell. "Both of you." "I doubt that," Roswell replied. He stood there, rifle ready, until both men had ridden out of sight. Only then did he lower the weapon and call out to Beatrice. "It's safe. They're gone." The door flew open and Beatrice ran out, throwing herself into his arms. She was shaking, and Roswell realized she was crying. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I brought this to your door." Hey now." Roswell set the rifle aside and wrapped his arms around her. "You didn't bring anything I can't handle. They're gone. They won't be back. You don't know that. My father is vindictive and Marcus is worse. Then we'll deal with it if it happens. But Beatrice, look at me." He waited until she raised her tear-stained face. "I meant every word I said. You're my wife. This is your home, and I will protect what's mine with everything I have. I don't want you to get hurt because of me, and I don't want you to carry fear like a weight on your shoulders. We're in this together, remember. Whatever comes, we face it together." Beatrice nodded, burying her face against his chest. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, drawing strength from the connection between them. That night, Roswell wrote a letter to the sheriff in Denver, detailing Marcus Whitfield's threats and Beatrice's father's attempt to force her into an unwanted marriage. He included copies of their marriage certificate and a statement from Reverend Thomas. If legal trouble was coming, he wanted to be prepared. "Will it help?" Beatrice asked, watching him seal the envelope. "It might. At the very least, it establishes our position. You're legally my wife. That has weight, even against men with money. I never wanted to bring trouble to you." Roswell pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You brought joy to me, purpose, love. If trouble comes along with that, I'll handle it gladly." Spring came in earnest in late March, melting the snow and turning the world green and new. With the warmer weather came work, endless work preparing the ranch for the year ahead. Beatrice proved herself invaluable, working alongside Roswell from dawn until dusk. She learned to rope and brand, to doctor sick cattle, to mend fences until her hands were calloused and strong. In April, Mary Henderson came to visit and pulled Beatrice aside with a knowing smile. "How are you feeling, dear?" "Fine. Tired, but that's just the work." "Is it just the work, or could it be something else?" Beatrice stared at her, comprehension dawning slowly. "I don't know, maybe. I haven't thought about it." "When was your last monthly?" Beatrice thought back, counting weeks in her head, her eyes widened. "I don't remember. Before the wedding, I think." Mary's smile grew. "That would be about 4 months ago. Beatrice, I think you might be expecting." The news hit Beatrice like a thunderbolt. A baby. She might be carrying Roswell's child. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "What do I do? First, we'll be certain. I know the signs to look for, and then, if it's true, you tell that husband of yours. He's going to be over the moon." Mary was right on both counts. By the end of her visit, she was confident that Beatrice was indeed pregnant, probably about 3 months along. And when Beatrice told Roswell that evening, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He stared at her for a long moment, processing the words. Then a grin split his face, wide and joyous, and he whooped loud enough to startle the horses in the corral. He picked Beatrice up and spun her around, laughing like a boy. "We're having a baby," he kept saying. "We're having a baby." "We are," Beatrice confirmed, laughing with him. "In about 6 months, if Mary's calculations are right." Roswell set her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Are you all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you be working so hard?" "I'm fine. Pregnant women aren't fragile, Roswell. Mary says I can keep doing everything I've been doing within reason." "Within reason," Roswell repeated, looking unconvinced, but his hand strayed to her belly, resting there with wonder. Our child," Beatrice agreed, covering his hand with hers. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and into summer. Beatrice's belly swelled, and with it came a contentment she had never known. Roswell was attentive to the point of being comical, constantly checking on her, bringing her water, insisting she rest when she was perfectly capable of continuing to work. "You're going to drive me mad with all this fussing," she told him one evening as he insisted on helping her into a chair. "I'm allowed to fuss. You're carrying my child, our child, and I'm perfectly capable of sitting down on my own." But she was smiling as she said it, and Roswell knew she didn't really mind. He knelt beside her chair and pressed a kiss to her belly, now round and firm under her dress. "Hello in there, little one. Your mother thinks I fuss too much. Your father is going to spoil you rotten," Beatrice said, running her fingers through Roswell's hair. "Damn right I am." In August, with Beatrice's due date approaching, they made the decision to move into town temporarily. Roswell wanted to be close to Mary Henderson and the doctor, just in case. They rented a small room above the general store, and Beatrice spent her days preparing baby clothes and blankets while Roswell worked odd jobs around town to pay for the room and save money for the supplies they would need. The baby came on a warm evening in late September, after 12 hours of labor that left Beatrice exhausted but euphoric. Roswell paced outside the room like a caged animal, nearly wearing a hole in the floor, until Mary finally emerged with a smile. "You have a son," she announced. "And he's healthy and strong, just like his father." Roswell was inside the room in an instant. Beatrice lay in the bed, pale and tired but radiating happiness. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. Roswell approached slowly, almost afraid, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. He was the most beautiful thing Roswell had ever seen. "Would you like to hold him?" Beatrice asked softly. Roswell nodded, not trusting his voice. He took the baby carefully, cradling him against his chest with the same gentleness he had shown Beatrice's frozen feet all those months ago. The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but searching, and Roswell felt something in his chest crack wide open. "Hello, son," he whispered. "I'm your father, and I promise you I will never let you walk cold in this world." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "That's perfect. That's exactly right." They named him Thomas, after the reverend who had married them, with the middle name James for Roswell's grandfather. Tommy, they called him, and he became the center of their universe. Returning to the ranch in October with a newborn was both challenging and wonderful. Tommy was a good baby, as babies went, sleeping in stretches long enough to let his exhausted parents rest. Roswell proved to be a natural father, patient and loving, not afraid to change diapers or walk the floor with a crying infant. Beatrice watched him with their son and fell in love with him all over again. The first year of Tommy's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. His first smile, his first laugh, his first tooth. The day he rolled over, the day he sat up on his own. Every milestone was celebrated and treasured. The ranch prospered too. Roswell's hard work was paying off. The cattle herd had grown, and his reputation as a horse trainer brought buyers from as far as Denver. With Beatrice managing the household accounts and planning for the future, they were able to save money for the first time. "I think we can start building next spring," Roswell said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Tommy play with a wooden horse Roswell had carved for him. "A real house. 2 stories with a proper kitchen for you and enough bedrooms for more children." "More children," Beatrice teased. "You want to do this again?" "I want a whole houseful," Roswell admitted. "If you're willing, brothers and sisters for Tommy. A real family." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. "I want that too. A family. A home. All of it." In the spring of 1885, construction began on the new house. Roswell hired help from town, and the Hendersons pitched in on weekends. It rose slowly but steadily, a testament to hard work and dreams made real. By summer, the frame was complete. By fall, the walls and roof were finished. They moved in just before the first snow, and Beatrice cried as she walked through rooms that were spacious and light-filled and entirely theirs. Tommy was 2 years old now, running everywhere on chubby toddler legs, exploring every corner of his new home with delight. And Beatrice was pregnant again, due in the spring. "It's everything I ever dreamed of," she told Roswell as they stood in the parlor of their new home. "Everything and more." "We built it together," Roswell said. "This life, this family, this future, all of it together." Their second child, a daughter they named Rebecca Ann, was born in April of 1886. She had Beatrice's honey-colored eyes and Roswell's dark hair, and from the moment she arrived, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. "I'm outnumbered," Roswell would say with mock despair as Tommy climbed on one side of him and Rebecca nursed at Beatrice's breast. But his eyes were full of love and contentment. The years rolled on, bringing changes and challenges, but also deep, abiding joy. Tommy grew tall and sturdy, learning to ride and rope at his father's side. Rebecca proved to have her mother's quick mind and determination. In 1888, another son joined the family, Henry Michael, and 2 years later a second daughter, Catherine Mee. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Roswell hired permanent help, 2 cowboys who lived in the bunkhouse he built near the barn. The cattle operation expanded, and his horses became known throughout Colorado for their quality and temperament. Beatrice took over the business side entirely, managing accounts and contracts with a skill that surprised even her. "You should have been a businesswoman," Roswell told her one evening as he reviewed her meticulous ledgers. "I am a businesswoman," Beatrice replied. "I just happen to run a ranch instead of a shop." In 1892, 10 years after that frozen morning when Roswell found Beatrice barefoot in the frost, they stood together on the porch of their home and watched their 4 children play in the yard. Tommy was now 10, already showing the height and strength that would make him a formidable man. Rebecca was 6, all fierce determination and wild curls. Henry was 4, gentle and thoughtful. Catherine was 2, toddling after her siblings and demanding to be included in everything. "Can you believe it's been 10 years?" Beatrice asked, leaning into Roswell's side. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like forever." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "No regrets, not a single one. Only that I didn't find you sooner." They had built something remarkable, not just a successful ranch, but a genuine partnership. They made every major decision together, supported each other through difficulties, and celebrated each success as a shared victory. They had weathered drought and hard winters, illness and injury, the normal struggles of frontier life. Through it all, their love had deepened and matured into something unshakable. Beatrice's father had died in 1887, never having reconciled with his daughter. She had made her peace with it, though it saddened her. Marcus Whitfield had remarried to another young woman from a desperate family, and Beatrice sent up prayers for the woman's safety and strength. She had escaped that fate. Not everyone was so fortunate. In the summer of 1893, the Henderson Ranch was struck by tragedy. Thomas Henderson died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving Mary alone at 63 to manage everything. Without hesitation, Roswell and Beatrice brought her into their home, giving her a place and a purpose with their growing family. She became grandmother to their children and a beloved member of their household. "You saved me, just like Roswell saved Beatrice all those years ago," Mary told them through tears of gratitude. "Family takes care of family," Beatrice said simply. "You were there for us when we needed you. Of course we'll be here for you now." The children thrived. Tommy showed an aptitude for horse training that rivaled his father's. Rebecca discovered a love of books and learning that delighted Beatrice. Henry had a gift with animals that went beyond training into something almost mystical. Catherine was still young, but already she was showing signs of the same fierce independence her mother had displayed. In 1895, as Beatrice approached her 33rd birthday, she discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the others, leaving her more tired and uncomfortable. Roswell watched with concern, remembering how young and strong she had been with Tommy, how easily she had bounced back. Now, though still beautiful and vital, she was older, and the pregnancy took its toll. "Maybe we should stop after this one," he suggested gently as he rubbed her swollen feet one evening. "Maybe," Beatrice agreed, "though I said that after Catherine too." "I'm serious, Bea. I don't want to risk your health. The children we have are blessing enough for any lifetime." She smiled at him, this man who had saved her life in every way that mattered. "Whatever we decide together." The baby, another boy they named Samuel Roswell, arrived in March of 1896 after a difficult labor that terrified Roswell. But both mother and child came through healthy, and Samuel proved to be a happy, easy baby who seemed to sense he was the last, and was determined to be no trouble at all. With 5 children ranging from toddler to teenager, the house was always full of noise and life. Roswell expanded the operation again, building a second barn and buying more land. The Strand Ranch was now one of the most successful in the region, known for quality livestock and honest dealing. But success, while gratifying, was never the point. The point was the life they had built together, the family they had created from nothing but determination and love. On quiet evenings, when the children were finally in bed and the ranch was settled for the night, Roswell and Beatrice would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over land that was theirs, and marvel at how far they had come. "You ever think about that morning?" Beatrice asked one such evening. "When you found me in the frost." "All the time," Roswell admitted. "I think about how easily I might have ridden past, how I almost didn't stop because I was tired and cold and just wanted to get home. I think about how that one decision changed everything." "It changed everything for me too. If you hadn't stopped, I would have died there. You would have found a way. You're the strongest person I've ever known." Beatrice shook her head. "I was strong because I had to be, but with you I get to be more than strong. I get to be soft sometimes. Vulnerable, loved, that's a greater gift than you know." Roswell pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You gave me the same gift. Before you, I was just surviving, going through the motions. You made me want to live really live. You made me want to build something, create something, leave a mark on the world." "We did that," Beatrice said, gesturing to the ranch spread out before them, the house filled with their children, the legacy they were creating. "We built all of this, together." The years continued to unfold. Tommy married at 21, bringing his bride Sarah to live on the ranch in a house Roswell helped him build. Rebecca went to Denver for school, determined to become a teacher, and came back to open the first schoolhouse in Loveland that wasn't run by the church. Henry took over the horse training operation, expanding it beyond anything Roswell had imagined. Catherine, true to form, decided she wanted to run a ranch of her own someday and spent every moment learning everything she could. Samuel grew up surrounded by love and horses and wide open spaces. Grandchildren arrived, first Tommy and Sarah's son, then their daughter, then more as the years went by. The ranch house that had once seemed so spacious was regularly filled to bursting with family gatherings and holidays. Roswell and Beatrice, now in their 40s and looking toward 50, watched their legacy grow and multiply. In 1905, on a clear autumn day much like the one when they had married 23 years before, Roswell and Beatrice took a rare day away from the ranch. They rode out to the spot where he had found her, where she had lain barefoot and freezing in the frost. A small marker stood there now, placed by Roswell on their 10th anniversary. It read simply, "Here, a life began." They stood hand in hand, looking at the marker and remembering. I still can't believe how far we've come, Beatrice said. From that morning to now, 5 children, 3 grandchildren, a ranch that's known throughout Colorado, a life beyond anything I could have dreamed. I promised you that you'd never walk cold again, Roswell said. I meant it in more ways than one. I wanted you to always feel safe, loved, warm in your heart even when the world was cold. You kept your promise, Beatrice said, tears sliding down her cheeks. Every single day for 23 years you've kept that promise. You've given me warmth and safety and love beyond measure. And you gave me purpose, meaning, a reason to build instead of just survive. You gave me a family, Bea, not just children, though they're precious beyond words, but a real family, the kind I never had growing up. You made me believe I could be something more than my father's son. They stood there as the sun climbed higher, warming the autumn air, and thought about all the moments that had brought them to this place. The fear and the courage, the struggle and the triumph. The quiet moments and the grand gestures. Every day, every choice, every laugh and tear had woven together into a tapestry of a life well lived. I love you, Beatrice said. I've loved you since you lifted me onto your horse and took me home. I'll love you until the day I die and beyond if there's any justice in the universe. I love you too, Roswell replied. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. The best decision I ever made was stopping that morning. Everything good in my life came from that moment. They kissed there, in the spot where their story had begun, with the autumn sun warm on their faces and the knowledge that they had built something rare and precious together. The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes of time. Mary Henderson passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1908, mourned by the entire family she had adopted and loved. Roswell and Beatrice laid her to rest beside Thomas in the town cemetery, with half of Loveland in attendance to honor a woman who had been grandmother to dozens and friend to hundreds. In 1912, Roswell suffered a riding accident that left him with a limp for the rest of his life. He was 60 that year, still vital and active but increasingly willing to let his children and grandchildren take over the heavy work of the ranch. Beatrice, too, slowed down, though her mind remained sharp as ever. She ran the business side of the operation from the office Roswell had built for her, managing accounts and investments with a skill that had made them genuinely wealthy. But wealth, like success before it, was never the point. The point was gathering around the table with children and grandchildren and watching the next generation grow. The point was sitting on the porch in the evenings with Roswell, holding hands and watching the sun set like they had done 1,000 times before. The point was the quiet moments and the joy of a life shared fully and completely. In the spring of 1915, on their 33rd wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. It seemed like half of Colorado was there. The governor sent a telegram. Former President Theodore Roosevelt, who had visited the ranch once on a hunting trip and had taken a liking to the straightforward cowboy and his formidable wife, sent a gift and a letter of congratulations. But the best gift was simply being surrounded by the family they had created. 5 children, all successful and happy in their own right. 12 grandchildren at last count, ranging from infants to teenagers. Friends and neighbors who had become like family over the decades. Roswell stood to give a toast, leaning on the cane he now used. 33 years ago, I found a woman barefoot in the frost. I promised her she would never walk cold again. What I didn't know then was that she would do the same for me. Beatrice has warmed my life in every possible way. She's made me a better man, given me a family, built an empire by my side. Every good thing I have, I owe to her. Every happy moment started with that morning when I decided to stop and help someone in need. So if there's a lesson in all this, it's simple. Be kind. Stop when someone needs help. Take a chance on love. Because you never know when you might find your whole future waiting for you, barefoot in the frost. There wasn't a dry eye in the house when he finished. Beatrice stood and kissed him, to cheers and applause from everyone gathered. You gave me the same gift, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. You gave me a life worth living, a love worth having, a family worth building. I was lost when you found me, and you've been my home ever since. The party continued late into the night, filled with music and dancing and laughter. Roswell and Beatrice, both now in their 60s, danced together under the stars, moving slowly but still perfectly in sync. Their children watched with smiles and not a few tears, knowing they were witnessing something rare, true love that had lasted and grown and deepened over 3 decades. As the years moved toward 1920, Roswell and Beatrice gradually handed over more responsibility to their children. Tommy and Henry now ran the ranch operations. Rebecca's school had become a fixture in the community. Catherine had indeed bought her own ranch and was running it with characteristic efficiency. Samuel, the baby, had become a veterinarian and had a thriving practice in Loveland. But though they stepped back from daily operations, Roswell and Beatrice remained the heart of the family. Grandchildren sought them out for advice and stories. Great-grandchildren began to arrive, and there was nothing Roswell loved more than sitting on the porch with a great-grandchild on his knee, telling tales of the old days. "Tell us about how you met Grandma," was a constant refrain, and Roswell would tell the story again, never tiring of it. The frost, the barefoot woman, the promise he had made, and how that promise had changed both their lives forever. In the summer of 1923, Roswell fell ill. It started as a cough that wouldn't go away, then progressed to weakness and weight loss. The doctor in Loveland was grave when he gave the diagnosis: consumption, tuberculosis. At 69, there was little they could do. Beatrice refused to accept it. She nursed him with the same fierce determination she had brought to every challenge in their life together. She made him special foods, brewed teas, sat with him through long nights when the coughing wouldn't stop. The family gathered, all of them, filling the house with love and support. But even will and love couldn't hold back the inevitable. In October, as the leaves turned gold and the air took on the crisp edge of approaching winter, Roswell grew weaker. He could no longer get out of bed, could barely speak without triggering coughing fits. Beatrice sat beside him constantly, holding his hand, whispering memories and love. "Do you remember," she would say, "that first morning, when you brought me here and warmed my feet by the fire?" Roswell would smile, though it cost him effort. "Best day of my life," he would rasp, "finding you." On a clear evening in late October, with his wife beside him and his children gathered around, Roswell Strand took his last breath. Beatrice held him as he went, tears streaming down her face, whispering over and over, "Thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for stopping that morning. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me." The funeral was held 3 days later. The church was packed with people standing outside because there wasn't room for everyone who wanted to pay their respects. Roswell Strand, the cowboy who had built a ranch and a family from nothing but hard work and love, was laid to rest in the Loveland Cemetery with full honors. Beatrice stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and spoke the words she had prepared. "My husband once promised me I would never walk cold again. He kept that promise for 41 years. He warmed my life, my heart, my soul. He gave me everything I never knew I needed and more than I ever thought I deserved. The world is colder without him, but I will carry his warmth with me until we meet again." The grief was profound, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. But as the weeks and months passed, Beatrice found her footing again. She had her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. She had the ranch, still thriving. She had memories enough to fill a lifetime and the knowledge that she had been truly, deeply loved. She lived another 7 years, active and engaged to the end. She taught her great-grandchildren to read and do arithmetic. She helped manage the ranch finances even when her eyesight began to fail. She sat on the porch of the house Roswell had built and watched the sun set over land they had claimed and tamed together. In the spring of 1930, at the age of 76, Beatrice Strand passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her the next morning, looking serene and younger than she had in years, a smile on her face. They liked to think she had seen Roswell waiting for her, reaching out his hand like he had that frost-covered morning so many years ago. She was buried beside him, their graves marked with a single stone that read, Roswell Strand, 1854–1923, Beatrice Cooper Strand, 1854–1930, You'll Never Walk Cold Again. Their story became legend in Loveland, passed down through generations. The ranch continued under Tommy's children, and then his grandchildren, remaining in the Strand family for over a century. The house Roswell built still stands, preserved now as a historical site, with exhibits telling the story of the cowboy who found a woman barefoot in the frost and built an empire with her. But more than the ranch or the historical markers, what endured was the example they set. Of kindness in the face of suffering, of courage in the face of fear, of the power of two people who chose each other and built something beautiful together. Couples from all over Colorado and beyond would visit their graves, would stand hand in hand and promise each other the same thing Roswell had promised Beatrice: you'll never walk cold again. It became a symbol of commitment, of the kind of love that warms from the inside out, that weathers every storm and grows stronger with time. Their great-great-grandchildren still tell the story, sitting on porches much like the one Roswell and Beatrice sat on, watching the sun set over the Colorado landscape. They tell about the frost and the promise, about the ranch and the family, about 41 years of partnership that proved love could be both practical and profound. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Roswell and Beatrice Strand are together still, walking hand in hand through fields that never freeze, under skies that never dim, building something new in a place where promises last forever and love never grows cold. Their story began with a chance encounter on a frozen morning in 1882. It grew into a marriage, a family, a legacy. It proved that sometimes the best decisions are the ones we make without thinking, driven by nothing more than compassion and the recognition of another soul in need. Roswell Strand saw a woman barefoot in the frost and made her a promise. In keeping that promise, he found his purpose, his love, his life's greatest work. And Beatrice Cooper, who ran from certain misery into uncertain hope, found a man who saw her worth and helped her build a future beyond her wildest dreams. Together, they showed what was possible when two people commit to each other completely. When they choose partnership over power, kindness over cruelty, love over fear. Their story is a reminder that the greatest legacies aren't built from wealth or fame, but from the daily choice to honor the promises we make and cherish the people we love. And every time someone visits their graves, every time the story is told to a new generation, Roswell and Beatrice's promise lives on. You'll never walk cold again. Not in this life, not in the next, not in the warmth of memory or the continuation of family. Their love created something that transcended their own lives, that touched hundreds and then thousands, that became a beacon of hope for anyone who doubts that true love exists. It does exist. It's in the decision to stop when someone needs help. It's in the promise to protect and cherish. It's in 41 years of partnership through joy and sorrow, success and struggle. It's in the choice to build together, to dream together, to face whatever comes together. Roswell and Beatrice Strand built more than a ranch. They built a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to create beauty from nothing, to warm even the coldest hearts and the darkest moments. Their story is proof that sometimes fate places exactly the right person in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, and that the bravest thing we can do is recognize that moment and seize it with both hands. From a frozen morning to a legacy that lasted generations, from a desperate woman and a kind cowboy to an empire built on love and hard work, their story endures. Not because it was extraordinary, though it was, but because it was real. Real love, real struggle, real triumph. The kind of story that reminds us what matters most in life. Not what we accumulate, but who we love and how we love them. And so the story ends where it began, full circle and complete, with a promise made and kept, with cold feet warmed and a cold world made warmer by the presence of true love. With proof that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness, and that the most profound promises are the ones we keep not just in grand gestures but in daily, quiet devotion. Roswell Strand found Beatrice Cooper barefoot in the frost on a cold November morning in 1882. He promised she would never walk cold again, and in keeping that promise, he found everything he had been searching for without knowing it: purpose, partnership, passion, and a love that would outlast both their lives and inspire generations to come. That is their story. That is their legacy. That is the proof that love, real love, can change everything.